Well, 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 we are not even halfway through November, and as we bring you this latest Serie A Chronicles podcast, the news is that the champions of Italy, Napoli, who won the league title for the first time in more than 3 decades last season, have already parted ways with their new manager, Rudi Garcia. Unfortunately, today we have parted ways just for the week with Mina Rzouki, who is not well, but we have the ideal person on to fill those shoes this week because we're talking about Napoli and we have the incredible world feed commentator for Serie A, Patrick Kendrick, on with us, who is an expert in all things Naples. Patrick, welcome. And I already mentioned this question before we started, and you just started laughing right away. The word currently out there, and we should be cautious because it hasn't been made official just yet, is that Rudi Garcia is going to be replaced by Walter Mazzarri. Of course, he's been Napoli manager before. Do you like this appointment?
In short, no. But then again, I wasn't overly sold on the Rudi Garcia appointment, to be honest. So first of all, thank you very much for having me on board.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry that I'm not the ideal replacement for Mina, but we'll do as we can on that score. I think it's a fairly underwhelming appointment, and I would say that echoes what we saw this summer when Rudi Garcia was appointed. And I don't think anyone expected De Laurentis to bring back Rudi Garcia, who we hadn't seen in Serie A since 2016 when he left the Roma job. And I don't think many people expected to see Walter Mazzarri come back to Napoli. And we are, of course, when we're recording this, it's still a story which is developing. So we'll wait and see as to whether he might have a little surprise up his sleeve, De Laurentis, because 24 hours ago it was Igor Tudor who looked the front runner. So Mazzarri has plenty to prove. He did have a good first spell at Napoli, but it's like everything that we've seen in football, and dare I say it, times change, coaches can regress. I think we've seen that many times in Italian football as well. We saw it with Alberto Malesani, who won the UEFA Cup with Parma, and then when we saw him at Sassuolo, he lost 6 matches out of 6. So I think Mazzarri has plenty to prove. Some underwhelming spells recently with Cagliari. I remember Torino, it didn't pan out eventually, albeit he had a good first season. So the stopgap, and it's not what you want, as you said, going into the November international break with a team that was so dominant in Serie A last season. Same players as well, sort of Kim Min-jae.
Yeah, let's wind it back and start there. I threw straight to the Mazzarri question because it's current, of course, exactly as Patrick says. By the time you listen to this, maybe De Laurentiis would have pulled a rabbit out of a hat, but that's certainly the way it looks like it's going right now. Let's wind this back to the beginning. So in the spring, Napoli win the league title. It's the craziest party we've ever seen. Well, lots of us have seen. I wasn't, I suppose, old enough to really take in those Maradona moments properly. I was still a very little when that happened. So craziest party I've seen for a Serie A title win in my football watching lifetime, I suppose I should say. And everything is wonderful, except it isn't, because Luciano Spalletti turns around really before the end of the season. We knew he was done, and some of that comes to his relationship with the owner, Aurelio De Laurentiis. Rudi Garcia is this really sort of left field appointment, as you just said, Patrick, not someone who a lot of people were expecting. And in terms of following up on this great success, your third ever league title, you've hired someone. I think at this moment, I'm expecting one of two things for Napoli. Either you double down on, we've become a big, successful club right in this moment, and they've always been a big club, that's poorly expressed, but you know what I mean. We're a winning team right now. Let's hire a proven winner. Or let's hire someone new and exciting. And Garcia doesn't fit either of those two briefs. Garcia is this guy who was sort of interesting when he first showed up at Roma, but didn't really progress the project there after Spalletti, and whose only major silverware was at Lille in 2011, so more than a decade ago. And then almost immediately, De Laurentiis starts giving interviews where he goes, well, I spoke to Thiago Motta and he didn't want it. And then I went for Luis Enrique. Well, good thing we didn't get Luis Enrique. Look how he's doing. Extraordinary sort of not only appointment, but then sort of absolute unwillingness to back the appointment.
Undermining the head coach. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose to some extent, Patrick, and you've observed this plenty in your time covering football down in Naples, on one hand extraordinary, and on one hand a little bit par for the course with how things sometimes happen with De Laurentiis and the way he runs that football club.
Yeah, absolutely credible given where it is, the city, the fan base, the owner, everything you've just touched upon. I think, Naples and Napoli as a football club do tend to thrive and dine out on drama a little bit. And, it is that very dizzy high to a slightly drab low, to be honest. And I think Rudi Garcia didn't help himself. I remember watching aghast, really, his unveiling. When he didn't even name check his predecessor, Luciano Spalletti. There's still a lot of bad blood there because it's Spalletti and his second spell at Roma who replaced Garcia when he was dismissed mid-season for losing a Rome derby, if memory serves. And he gave credit to everyone inside the organisation apart from the head coach, who he didn't even reference in his role or euphemistically. So I thought that was, I remember texting some colleagues who cover Napoli week in, week out, and I said, is it just me or was that deliberate snub to Spalletti? And they said, yes, we interpreted it that way as well. So I think immediately the media locally were lukewarm towards him. There's a little bit of a rivalry between Roma and Napoli as well. So the idea of having a sort of Roma cast off from many years before probably wasn't the most enticing appointment. As you said, you've just gone from someone who's won the league title and so convincingly playing such attractive football to someone who in these first 12 matches of the season hasn't really done enough at all to show that there is anything resembling a coherent game plan or how he intends to take this team forward. So, and then Garcia, made a rod for his own back by suggesting he had enemies in the Neapolitan media, and and they're an impatient fan base and they're an impatient test pack as well. And so, unfortunately, unless you are thriving, then you're going to struggle there. And he didn't give himself, he didn't have much credit going in, and even less so after some of the results went awry. So I'm not surprised to see this decision come to pass. The only surprise is perhaps that, I apologise if you can hear banging, by the way, hammering away. There's people doing some renovations on the third floor. I feel like every time I do a podcast anywhere, then someone in my building decides they need to refurbish their entire flat. So I apologise if that is coming through. But yeah, I think De Laurentiis has made this decision, albeit he was pondering it last month with Antonio Conte and decided not to make an appointment because from all accounts Conte turned him down. So this is bad planning. And as you said, when he basically leaked the fact that Rudi Garcia was not his second or third, but perhaps possibly even his seventh or eighth choice in the summer, I don't think this was ever going to end well.
Yeah, there was a sort of almost sort of perfect ending to the Rudi Garcia story, in as much as De Laurentiis, the one criteria he really made clear when he was making an appointment last summer was, I want someone who can work with a 4-3-3. And Garcia came in and played a 4-3-3 all the way up to this last game against Empoli, where he says, right, I'm going to try a 4-2-3-1, which, look, on the surface, I can understand the thinking behind it, because you've got Giovanni Simeone, you've got Giacomo Raspadori. You think, well, maybe getting these two players on the pitch together is a good thing, and having them through the middle, especially when we're missing Victor Osimhen, makes some sense. So you're trying to do that. What makes no sense to me is doing that at the same time as just dropping Kvaratskhelia, even though Garcia said, well, dropping is an ugly word. I'd rather think of it as we're going to bring him off the bench and he'll win the game in the second half, which he nearly did against Empoli. Sorry, I sort of breezed over the result this week, and they lost 1-0 to Empoli, having conceded in the I think the first minute of injury time to a goal to Kovalenko. Empoli, who've been struggling very badly this season, second bottom in the table before this game, so it was a bit of a shock result, except for the fact that it's not shocking because of how Napoli have been playing recently. Just to sort of put the sort of final word on this Napoli sort of chapter under Garcia, just to talk about the football, Patrick. Obviously, there's been a series of substitutions and reactions to substitutions that have suggested that not all is harmonious. Of course, first it was Kvaratskhelia. I think that was against Genoa, wasn't it, where he was subbed off in the 89th minute, and they were chasing an equaliser and he looked perplexed. The next game against Bologna, he takes Osimhen off in the 86th minute, and Osimhen sticking two fingers up saying, why aren't we playing two up front? Having
missed the penalty, and he was desperate to score in that same game, to sort of atone for that initial absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
and it was Politano as well, so I think it was three separate players. Yeah.
Yeah, and not just three separate players, but the whole attack basically, like one at a time, making them feel perhaps undervalued or underappreciated. But sort of beyond those substitutions, because we can pick at individual substitutions, it felt like the football just wasn't where it was last season. And to me, some of that was just a loss of, to some extent, the loss of the freedom they played with under Spalletti. Spalletti's whole thing was this sort of famous idea that football isn't played between the lines anymore, it's played between the players, and I want my team to flow to those spaces where the spaces are and occupy them. I felt like some of that was lost, but I don't know if there's anything that you saw in the way they played this season, Patrick, that you thought it's just not the same.
I just thought, I mean, take this with a pinch of salt because I'm slightly biased when it comes to Luciano Spalletti, who I think is the best thing since sliced bread. But I do think he was very careless in the way he approached this entire job, not acknowledging what had been done before. It's the old adage: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But he conceded that he hadn't watched any of Napoli's games from the previous season. And I would counter that by saying, Nicky, if you or I were to go into a new job, you would like to think that the first thing we would do is speak to our colleagues on the ground and say, how does the organisation run? Is it running well? Clearly it is, because Napoli have just won the title after 33 years. But it seemed to be a complete departure with what had gone before. The local press were perplexed, saying, why is Lobotka no longer the heartbeat of his team, as he had been the previous season? And Garcia countered by saying, I don't want everything to go through one player. If it goes through one player, you shut down that player and you become predictable, and the way to marginalise the team is that the opposition just sort of shut them down and you become predictable, which on paper is the right thing to do. But I would just say, why not start by going with continuity and trying to get off to a good start, buy yourself some time, and then when you have a bit more of an opportunity, then make some tweaks. But we know what it's like in football. Beyond pre-season, you have September run, especially if you're playing in Europe, league matches, Champions League matches, and an international break, the same in October and November. And until the spring, there's very little time to do any meaningful work between results. So I think the best thing would have been, in hindsight, and it's obviously easy to say, would have been to have stuck the same system, stuck with the same personnel. But I just think there was sort of change to change his sake, and not really with any sort of coherent logic behind what he was trying to achieve. And we saw the 4-4-2 a few times as well in his chasing game. And lest we forget, there were many close saves already. Napoli were 2-0 down at Genoa 2-2. They were 2-0 down at home to Milan 2-2. They haven't won a single big game this season. They lost at home to Lazio. They were beaten at home by Fiorentina. There's not been enough. There haven't been any high points at all. And unfortunately, the pressure has mounted, and it's come to this. So it's a shame. I think he'll struggle to get another job in Italy soon, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on Laurentis now in terms of getting the next appointment right, as we wait to see who it is.
Yeah, I think it's worth acknowledging that, look, any manager stepping into Spalletti's shoes was going to have a tough role filling it. I think that's the bit where we can be generous and say it's not an easy job taking on someone else's project, and that sort of balancing act of, do you make it yours or do you just sort of try and keep going what's there is hard. But I basically agree with everything you said, Patrick. So it's hard to have a sort of spiky argument on this one. I think it just is what it is with Garcia. To get briefly to this Mazzarri appointment, as it appears to be the Mazzarri appointment. Look, he did a good job when he was there a decade ago. Actually, he came in, I think they were sixth in his first season, they were in the top four the next season, maybe fifth the year after that, and then second in his final season. They had some good years, and actually I always sort of go back to the Champions League last 16 game against Chelsea in 2012, which for me, prior to maybe when Ancelotti came in and they played those great games against Liverpool, I think it was one of the better performances I'd seen from Napoli in a Champions League tie. And Chelsea, who go on to win that year, were really on the brink of being knocked out, because it was 3-1 in the first leg in Naples, and Ashley Cole, I think it was, makes an extraordinary stop on the line, and maybe that changes the outcome of the tie, because Chelsea eventually come back to win the second leg in extra time. So there were moments under Mazzarri of brilliant football. That was the Ezequiel Lavezzi, Edinson Cavani era. But as you say, And I think I sometimes beat the opposite drum with this a lot, where I'm always saying to people, look, footballers aren't static. They can get better in their careers because people get fixed impressions of people. But Mazzarri's trended the opposite direction, where it's like he's gone backwards and no longer has that, I don't know, that freshness about him that he might have had back then.
Yeah, I agree. And he's also had this criticism levelled against him that he's wedded with a back three or a 3-5-2, which we did see when he coached at Torino, and we saw him coaching at Inter. However, what I would say about that is we saw the same charges levelled against Eusebio Di Francesco, that he's dogmatic, he only ever plays 4-3-3. And after 3 really bad jobs, he seems to be doing well now with Frosinone. Mazzarri knows, let's give him a bit of credit, let's not write him off before he goes in. He knows the club, albeit, the club has changed dramatically in the time that he's been away. But he got very good results with a good group of players, as you said there, Hamsik, Lavetti, Cavani, the 3 tenors. He's going to have a very good team to work with here. And he actually has a difficult start because Napoli have games coming up away at Atalanta, they're at home to Inter, and they have Juventus coming up as well before Christmas. However, expectations are going to be low, I think. He can only do better than what Garcia's done, I think. And I actually think Garcia got it wrong because Laurentis was willing to concede that the target was only to get back into the Champions League. I think Napoli acknowledged the fact they've only ever won 3 titles, and they acknowledged the fact that they've never defended any of their Scudetti. So it was always going to be a tough act, whether it's Spalletti staying on, whether they'd appointed Italiano or Thiago Motta or Conte, whoever it may have been in the summer. It was always going to be a difficult task for them to win the title. So you're asking Mazzarri, can you get Napoli into the top 4 at the end of the season? And ironically, I think they are in the top 4, despite Garcia being about to lose his job. But there are warning signs there, which is why I think he's being proactive rather than reactive, De Laurentiis, after what we saw in October.
Yeah, and I suppose the other sort of big warning sign in some ways, that 1-1 draw with Union Berlin, who had lost their previous 12 games in the Champions League. But as you say, the overall position is not disastrous. They are still on track for the Champions League spot. They are actually, realistically, they need a draw in their final game home to Braga in the Champions League to get through that group. Things could be a lot worse. And I think when we talk about Mazzarri, it's very much what in Italy would be called the traghettatore. He's the ferryman. Yeah. They want him to get them safely from here to the end of the season and work everything out after that. But still, there's this big sort of warning sign for me, which is we've already gone through your list of everyone you would have preferred to appoint in the summer. We also now know you wanted to appoint Conte. We think you wanted to appoint Igor Tudor before you wanted Mazzarri. This is, working your way down the list constantly doesn't feel like the ideal way to do business. I'd really like to sort of spend even more sort of time contemplating this and what the team may look like, especially with that idea of a back 3. But I know we've only got you for a limited window, Patrick, and so much else happened this week, and I do want to get to some other games as well. The big one, obviously Milan blowing a 2-0 lead against Lecce. Some circumstance in this one, I would say. Calabria goes off injured at half-time. Pioli makes the decision to put Yunus Musa in as a right back. Poor Yunus Musa, who I think is maybe already sort of playing a bit more than everyone expected quite this early in his time at Milan, gets thrown in at right back and ultimately is responsible on both the goals. He loses his man for the first goal, and the attack starts down his side and he's way behind the play on the second one as Lecce come from 2-0 down to draw 2-2. I guess sort of framing this in the big picture, Patrick, are you #Pioli in or #Pioli out?
No, I think I would give Pioli at least until the end of the season. I think, again, you have to look at it through the prism of who could do a better job than the man who's currently in situ. Again, just linking it to what we were previously saying about Napoli. And there is still those ongoing regulations within Italian football where you can't do what Chelsea did with Graham Potter and go out and coach someone else's coach from a rival club and pay compensation. Otherwise, I think De Laurentiis might have been tempted to go to Joey Saputo at Bologna and say, let's have Thiago Motta, for instance. But coming to Milan, I think it's always going to be difficult because it is a rebuild, it is an overhaul. They had so many players leaving the summer, so many new faces coming in. I actually think they did good business. The Tonali deal is looking like the deal of the century, given the unfortunate circumstances which have befallen him and therefore Newcastle by extension. And I do think they recruited well, but I tend to agree with you. Musa unfortunately had to come in there because they are very light on players. I don't understand why Laurentis wasn't brought on as a more traditional fullback as opposed to Musa playing there. He's very versatile, but as you said, he made mistakes, seemed to lack confidence, got caught in possession, and the second goal in particular came down that side. I think Pioli has done enough in the 3.5 seasons that he's been at the club. It was 2019 he was appointed, wasn't it? So I think we're coming up, must be around 4 years to the day that he's a little bit beyond that he's been in charge. So I think occasionally things do become stale, which is why it was good to change up the personnel. But Milan had this result in their grasp, to be honest. You know, they were 2-0 up, they were the cruising. If Rangers scores to make it 3-0, then the game is put to bed. But it was a bit of revenge for Lecce because the same match the previous year had seen Lecce go 2-0 up at half time, only for Milan to score 2 goals in the second half. And it was Calabria actually scored the equaliser there, so perhaps ironic he wasn't on the pitch to do that. And I think we have to talk about the denouement of the match as well. Giroud, who just completely lost his head. I mean, that was more behaviour of a teenager as opposed to a 37-year-old. I mean, it was quite vile, the language he was directing a match official. And it was a yellow card for dissent and then a straight red, actually, which caught me off guard. I thought we'd been given 2 yellow cards for dissent, but the second one was a straight red for just, unacceptable, a volley of abuse towards the referee, who, was put in a difficult situation with Adu Abis, I think, by the video assistant referee, I think. And I did debate about this on social media, either last night or early this morning, I can't remember, but someone made the point, just for anyone who hasn't seen it, Roberto Piccoli in added time, a substitute comes on with Lecce having come back from 2-0 down to be level 2 or controls a long ball forward from Falcone, the goalkeeper turns and smashes it in from 30 yards past Maignan, who's slightly out of position. And I think it's to say it would have been Piccoli's biggest goal of his career. There wasn't a single Milan player moaning or asking for a free kick. Malik Sal, the player who was stamped on, albeit stamp is perhaps, they call it step on foot in Italy. He winced a little bit in pain, went down and then got back up, tried to defend the situation. And I don't think any Milan fans or anyone was expecting the goal to be disallowed. And the VAR's got involved and has seen it as a clear and obvious error, and the referees decided to overturn it. But Lecce hadn't beaten Milan in 17.5 years. Given what had gone on last season, it would have just been the most amazing second half performance. And you never know. It may be a decision that ends up saving Pioli's job in the long run, because I think, yes, he bought himself some time with that brilliant win over Paris Saint-Germain, but they lost at home to Juventus, they drew with Napoli, having led 2-0 against an underwhelming Napoli side. Then they lost again at home to Udinese. Had they lost to Lecce, 3 defeats in 4, 1 draw, 1 point from 12, suddenly the title race is completely compromised because of the way Inter are going. I think it might have spelled the end for Pioli. So it could be one of those where we look back in many years to come and as a sliding doors moment, and maybe Pioli's still there 5 years from now. We say, what if Piccoli's goal had stood? But an incredible game of football and a brilliant advertisement for Serie A, and a timely reminder that it's not only the Premier League with Chelsea, Manchester City, and 4 draws that can entertain.
Yeah, I think there's a few teams in Serie A that I feel like this about this season, but Lecce are one of those teams who aren't going to do anything this season. I mean, they're aiming to avoid relegation. They're not going to be in the European conversation, but who are a lot of fun to watch. There's just a lot of players right there who are enjoyable to watch. I mean, Pontus Almqvist at the start of the season was one who had me going, and Kristovic has been great. They've had lots of really sort of entertaining games, Lecce, even though I think probably about 13th is roughly where they're probably hoping to finish. They're not expecting to crack on and do any more. I think there's sort of this weird loss of perspective with Pioli for me at the moment. And I think some of it is just this frustration at seeing your neighbours doing so well, because it was the same after the Champions League semi-final. Was that sort of demanding of atonement from the players after the first leg? Was it really about them not trying hard enough, or was it just that you lost to Inter and you were mad about it? Inter are the best team in Italy right now. In my opinion, it's not close, although I think Juventus can make a title challenge out of it. And Milan, realistically should be aiming to get back into the top four, which they're currently third. So yes, they've had some bad weeks. And I think this result, the Udinese result, stand out more than the Napoli result and the Juventus result, even though, as you said, they were 2-0 up against Napoli, so throwing that away is not great. But I think that it's a bit of an overreaction given Pioli's previous work at the club to start saying it's time to get rid of him. And I said this last week, I'll say it again, borrowing from Matteo Bonetti, who Mina and I used to work with at ESPN. Who do you think is going to come in and do a better job this season? Maybe if it really gets dire and they start looking like they're going to miss the top four, the conversation changes. But I don't personally see that right now. Now, we've been mostly in agreement so far this podcast, Patrick. So I've got one where I know we're not going to be.
Excellent. I think I know where this is going.
Inter Frosinone, Federico Dimarco scored the goal of the season, a Puskas Award winner in waiting. And of course, Patrick, of course, he meant it.
Well, I think we're going to have to agree to differ here. I have been revising my opinion on this, and actually, I just thought it's quite mean-spirited of me. It's quite careless to say he didn't mean it. No one, all of the experts are saying he meant it. They're more qualified than me. My hunch is there's this telltale look away to his right, and then he looks down to strike the ball. Seems to be off balance, and the ball. I don't think, admittedly, Dimarco knows a lot more about striking the ball than I do. I don't think you necessarily hit it with your instep if you're trying to lob the keeper from there. I think you hit more of a driven shot with your laces. And I just think he's slightly off balance. He doesn't whip the ball as much as he wants to. Because he's off balance, he's leaning back, so therefore the ball takes a higher trajectory. He's hit it with power to try and curl it round, but he doesn't get enough curl, so consequently the curl doesn't take some of the direction off it. But either way, it's incredible. If it is a cross gone wrong, it's the best cross gone wrong we've ever seen. It made me think of Ronaldinho, and we'll never really get to the bottom of that debate. There was, I think I've seen someone compare it to Pope Maynard's of Atalanta on the final day of last season against Monza, which was very different. The way he struck it from a very similar position, that was a driven one. This one wasn't. But the thing about Dimarco is he's got such a great left foot, and we have seen him score wonder goals before. We saw him pin one into the top corner at Empoli. So it pains me to say I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because people seem to think I have it in for Dimarco. I don't at all. All I would say is I think initially before Inter signed Francesco Acerbi, when Inzaghi was using Dimarco both as a left wing back and a left centre back, in the latter role I think he wasn't in the right position, and we saw that with Inter's failed title bid in 2021-22. I think it was he who lost Arnautovic for the headed goal at the Dallara. But since he has become the wing back, since Perisic left the club and Dimarco has become first choice on the left side, he's one of the best players in that position in Europe. So whether he meant the goal or not, only he knows. I can understand him saying he meant it. There's not much to gain from saying it was a fluke. I think it would take huge. I was trying to think if anyone in that position in any sport would ever admit if it were a fluke. And the only thing I could think of is someone who's, the undisputed GOAT in their sport, someone like Tiger Woods or Ronnie O'Sullivan, golf and snooker respectively. I have a feeling that they're just so dominant and so confident in their own ability and that they would just say, it was a fluke, and, they'd almost get more credit for that. But I can understand the footballer would never really. There's a big difference, isn't there? Because it's either as you said, Puskas Award winner, or it's a complete misfit. And so I think it serves everyone.
I feel like Patrick's right here now, and I was sort of expecting a more strong no, he didn't mean it from what you were saying on Twitter. But what I feel like's happening right now, Patrick, is that you still don't think it was on purpose, but you don't want to be the one telling the kids that Santa isn't real. I feel like that's what's happening.
It's a great analogy. No, I think the way I'm looking at it now is, I think, history remembers the victors, doesn't it? I think you and I would agree that Inter are likely to win the Scudetto. So what better silhouette? Remember years ago when Yuri Djurkaeff scored that amazing scissor kick against Roma, and then it was on the front of a Panini sticker album the following year. I feel like it's the perfect postcard of Inter champions 2023-24, Dimarco, slightly off balance, striking the ball into the top corner. So I think because Inter are going to win the league, that's going to be one of the most iconic moments, going to be replayed and replayed. And so for the record, I'm now going to say it doesn't matter whether he meant it or not. It is a perfect goal in what could end up being a perfect domestic season for Inter. So we'll draw a line under it there, and hopefully I've got some of the Inter fans on side now that have been slating me from pillar to post and social media.
I do think that sort of whole context you're talking about with Pioli and Inter, I do think there's like this extra heightened element to it right now because they're both racing for the Seconda Stella. They both want to be the first of the two Milan clubs to get to 20 league titles, which puts the second star above your logo on the team badge. So I do think that's part of the picture. But for me, Inter are the best team in Italy. It's not close. Juventus are hanging on because they're Juventus and because they can win a Cortomuso again and again, and perhaps not playing in Europe will be enough to keep that title race close. But if you're asking me which of these teams is a better football team, no doubt in my mind it's Inter. Of course, we will see them play right after the international break. The first Derby d'Italia is coming up on the 26th of November. One quick question on Dimarco while we're on the topic.
Sure.
Mina and I got into this at the last international window because I was saying you can't leave this guy out of your Italy team just because you're playing with a back four. To me, it's a crime. He's too good to leave out right now with the options that Italy has. And I was saying, well, if you don't want to go away from the 4-3-3, why not try him as a forward? I mean, he does more attacking work than he does defensive work. Why not try him on the left of a front three? What's your thoughts on that, Patrick? Or do you think there's a different role he'd get in this team?
I think he's probably better at getting forward from a fullback. I think you'd be better off pairing him with a left-sided number 8, so Mezzal on the left is that midfield three that's a bit more defensive-minded or that's going to strike back, because I think Dimarco does his best work with those surging runs from deep. So if he's got that higher starting position, I think you limit a little bit of his impact. But I just wanted to come back to we've still got a bit of time. I wanted to come back to what you were saying there about Inter, because I think you're absolutely right. Pioli will be forever remembered as the coach that lost 5 derbies in a calendar year, and but for that goal from Rafael Leao, then it might have been 5 derbies without conceding, without scoring rather as well. And so I think that's the problem for me. If you and I had said at the start of last season to any Milan fans, you're going to get to the Champions League semi-final, they'd have been delighted, over the moon. But the problem is you get to the Champions League final and you come up against Inter. So then on the line is not only a place in the Champions League final, but you have to beat your cross-city rivals. So I think Pioli's probably being judged harshly through that particular prism of everything is being compared to what's happening at Inter. But people seem to forget that Simone Inzaghi arguably started as favourite for the title in each of his first 2 seasons. You know, he inherited a title-winning team from Conte, and they didn't win it. They lost it to Milan, and then last season they were also ranked. He has lots of credit from the Champions League final and from having won the Coppa Italia twice and the Supercoppa Italiana twice as well. So I think it would be nice if we segued into Juventus, because it's just I love the whole Juventus story. I love the Allegri. He doesn't care. He's just like one in the eye to his critics. He's saying, you know what, you're going to keep complaining that we don't play attractive football, campaign football, we can only win 1-0, we keep clean sheets, it's ugly. And I think he's almost mocking everyone by saying, you know what, I'm gonna double down on that approach, and maybe it's a huge advantage that Juventus only play once a week. I think if and when you can get the best out of Laurentis and Chiesa as a front pairing, they've got a big chance. I think if and when Allegri can get the best out of Laurentis and Chiesa, and it's still an if rather than a when, they've got a huge chance. They've got a huge chance. And I think the main thing about those Juventus sides that won 9 titles in a row, I haven't checked it statistically, empirically, but my hunch is that Juventus would never drop points against the teams they're expected to beat. So you could even have a situation whereby they don't need to beat Inter in the Derby d'Italia, the other side of the November international break. They get a goalless draw, they frustrate Inter, they stay within touch, 2 points. okay, Inter already through to the Champions League knockout stage, so they might be able to rest and rotate, but they're still going to have to travel, they're still going to have to play, they're going to play the Champions League in the spring, and the Coppa Italia kicks in. Inter will be involved in the three-match Super Cup as well in Saudi Arabia, and I say three-match because they'll probably play two matches, a semi-final and a final, and make it through there. So the fixture congestion is a big factor, and we've seen Inter drop points in the past. And I think because of that, if Juventus can just stay in touch and Allegri side can repeat in the spring and find some form, then you just never know. It would be a great Renaissance story. I mean, far be it from me to depict Juventus as plucky underdogs. They're not. They've got a huge wage bill. They've got a very expensively assembled squad. They've got a handsomely paid head coach. However, the way people have been talking about them has been quite disrespectful, to be honest. And the way people have written off Allegri, a man who won 5 league titles from as many years, 4 of them League Cup doubles, 2 Champions League finals, and just because he's had a couple of under par seasons, which, by the way, still ended up in top 4 finishes, albeit asterisk attached to last season. And I know we get into rocky territory when we talk about asterisks and Juventus and things, so pretty on there. But I think it's fascinating, and we need someone pushing into all the way, and it could well be Juventus. So it's really nice to see the Derby d'Italia meaning something for the Scudetto race.
This is just confirming everything I thought, Patrick. No Santa Claus, no Befana, just your black and white coal is what you're getting, and you'll enjoy it. No, I mean, look, I think it's a fascinating sort of thing that we've just been talking about, whether the purely out conversations premature. How many Allegri out conversations have we heard since he's been back at Juventus? And here he is, very much, I think, at the helm of the best title challenge to Inter. In fact, we had a question on this from Amit Champaneri on Twitter saying, "Hi Patrick, is the Serie A title race now just between Juventus and Inter? And what do you think Juventus' chances are?" I mean, I guess you've sort of answered Juventus' chances, but do you think it's a 2-horse race now, given what's happening at Napoli and Milan?
I think Milan are the only team that could force their way back into the reckoning, but I think they would need Inter to drop points back to back and win and suddenly get back in touch. I think if Milan are 5 or 6 points back at going in at Christmas, they've still got a chance. Any more than that, I think they're going to be struggling, just because I don't see this current Milan side capable of going on a 9 or 10 match winning run, which I think Inter are capable of doing, and I think Juventus could do it as well. So I'm still going to call it a 3-horse race, but I think Juventus, because of the lighter schedule, and they've still got good players to come back as well. Danilo should be fit at some stage. I think they're going to recruit in January, maybe Rodrigo de Paul or someone like that. And they might bring in, I know they've been linked with Berardi as well. So I think they're keen to bolster their midfield in particular, without Fagioli because of that betting ban, Pogba because of the doping ban. So with another body or two in the middle of the park, I think they've got a very good chance. Yeah.
I think we're all less excited to talk about this game, Patrick, but if I'm not mistaken, you were on the commentary. Lazio Roma, the Rome derby, and perhaps the most predictable 0-0 in Serie A history.
I think so. Yeah, probably it's quite depressing to say, but I think the most entertaining part of the derby was the build-up with the barb between Sarri and Mourinho. Sarri saying, they've got a friendly, whereas we're having to actually play a proper match. And Mourinho saying, I've never treated any game as a friendly, which is why I've won 26 pieces of silverware, and that's why other coaches, naming no names, but pointing clearly in the direction of Sarri, haven't won anywhere near as much. But it was being dubbed the Derby of Fear, Derby della Paura, and it proved to be thus. I think it's a shame because Roma in the first 15 minutes seemed to come out really aggressively, and I thought they could score, and then that would have changed the game. But it seems to be the way the derby is now panning out in between these two coaches. I still remember the first one between them, which was brilliant, 3-2 to Lazio. Pedro scored for Lazio, having scored in the previous derby for Roma. But since then, it was 2 cagey games last season. Ibanez's own goal for a 1-0, Zaccagni's goal for a 1-0, and ironically, Ibanez is now left. Zaccagni was out injured, so we didn't have any of the protagonists from last season. But it was one of those where I think they realised there would have been a lot more damage done for both of their seasons. Even though you only get 1 more point in the table, the psychological hit from losing the derby. Lazio have already lost 5 times this season. I think Roma have lost 4 times. They both gave themselves so much to do with those terrible starts. I mean, Leicester started the season losing at Lecce, having led 1-0. Then they lost at home to Genoa, and you're just playing tactics all the time. Then I think they lost to Milan as well. So they've lost 3 of their first 4 matches. So over the long haul, I'm confident that Lazio will finish in the top 6. I'm confident that Roma have enough quality in the squad. I don't think they have a particularly progressive brand of football. I'm not sure what Mourinho's trying to achieve there. He's out of contract in the summer as well. So whether he stays beyond season 3 remains to be seen. But if he can get them deep in a European competition again, I think the fans will be happy with that. It's a shame because on paper, in terms of the atmosphere, the choreography, the animosity between the fan bases, I think it is Italy's best game in terms of everything that it offers. But unfortunately, the football is what we're there to see, and that's been the most disappointing part of it.
It's strange what you say, because I have exactly the same sense about Roma and not being a very progressive team, and I think that comes out most of all in these big games. Obviously, the match against Inter, they tried to batten down and get the 0-0 there, which I think can't blame them given the current sort of gap between the teams. But when you look at just the numbers, Roma have scored more goals than any team in Serie A except for Inter and Napoli. They've scored 22 goals in 12 games. Lukaku's obviously come in and been hitting the ground running, but it is a sort of odd disparity between perhaps how they approach some games and then how they approach the games that they perceive as the big games, when they really do retreat into themselves. You've already alluded to it, Lazio. You think that they've got that top six in them. Sorry, do you need to go?
No, not at all. Just a quick caveat on the Roma. I mean, they scored 7 against Empoli and Paolo Zanetti in charge. So if you discount that, then I think it looks a little bit more ordinary. Yeah, that was a perfect story.
Yeah. Although 7 goals more than Napoli managed to score against Empoli, so there you have it.
True, yeah.
Football's a weird game, isn't it? Sometimes. I think you've sort of already covered it with Lazio in the top 6. I don't know if you think either of these teams is realistically going to push for the top 4, which is, of course, what they want to be in the top 4. And right now, I struggle to see it with either of them, but I suppose it all depends a bit as well on how Milan and Napoli shape up.
It does, yeah. I think we've got to see how Mazzarri gets on. Excuse me again. I think we need to see how Napoli do under their new coach, whether it's Walter Mazzarri or anyone. Rudi Garcia technically hasn't been dismissed either. So I think much depends on Napoli's next 3 games, which at least feature 2 of Atalanta, Inter and Juventus. I think that might be the next 3. So we'll know a lot more about them and how quick they are after that. I think Milan will have plenty to get in the top 4. And then the 4th side is a bit of a toss-up at the moment. So it's been another great Serie A season. And it's still a long way to go. And the most encouraging thing, I would say, just from sort of global perspective, looking at Serie A, I think it does appear that all Serie A sides have a good chance, if not a very good chance, of making it through to the Champions League knockout stages. You know, we've still got a question mark about Milan, who've left themselves plenty to do, but Inter already through, Napoli should be fine. The Rome clubs are doing what they need to do. Atalanta, everyone is exactly where they need to be. And if Milan can get that win at home to Dortmund, and it all goes down to match day 6 away at Newcastle, and but again, Inter flying the flag for Italy in Europe, Champions League finalists, and already through after 4 match days. But I mean, we've had some amazing moments already this season. For sure.
Yeah, I think with the Champions League, I always sort of repeat this every single year. It doesn't really matter how well you're playing now; it matters how well you're playing in February, because as long as you get through, that's what matters. But I am really fascinated to see how Inter go this season, because I don't see any reason they can't get to the semi-final or final again. I think they're that good, and I think there's a perception in perhaps crowds who don't watch Italian football as much that this team's run to the Champions League last season was a total fluke. It was just a soft draw. I think they've absolutely got it in them to knock out one of the big teams this season. Of course, it all still requires things to come together at the right time in the season to get the right performance on the day, but I think they have that in them personally. We've covered off the big topics, so maybe just a really quick, maybe even a one-word answer to this question from Bill Davidson on Twitter. Will Roma finish ahead of Lazio this season?
No.
I think I agree.
Because we've had 2 seasons under Sarri and Mourinho. Sarri finished above Mourinho both times, and I think it's going to be 3 from 3, to be honest. I think Roma are more of a cup team. I think Mourinho would admit that himself. And I think he's just a very intelligent man, and I think he's realised that the quickest route and the most reliable route to a lasting legacy at Roma is by winning trophies, and the best trophy opportunities come in Europe. And we saw that with the Conference League. He was a penalty shootout away from winning the Europa League. And, I think they could at least go to the quarterfinals, if not the semi-finals of that same competition this year. So my hunch is to finish above Roma, but Roma might end up having more to throw about come the end of the campaign.
Yeah, I essentially completely agree. I think Mourinho's focus will be on Europe again. I do think it's fascinating this season with Sarri because he was so dismissive of Europe up till now, and now with the Champions League, he can't just totally dismiss it. He sort of has to take that more, and perhaps that's even impacted things. Patrick, we've kept you longer than we said we would, so I think I should let you go here, and I'll wrap up the rest of the games and the Euro qualifiers. But thank you so much for coming on and for filling in incredibly for Mina. Of course, we know our listeners will miss Mina as well. It would have been great to have everyone together. Maybe we'll get that some other time in the future, but it was really great having you on.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Next time would be nice to see Mina again. And thank you. It's always nice to debate Serie A with someone so informed as you, Nicky. So it's great. And look forward to the next one.
Thanks, Patrick.
Okay. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much again to Patrick for joining us. That was brilliant. I will not take too long here on my own, just wrapping the rest of things up. But I should go through the rest of the results from the weekend quickly. Patrick and I'm not sure if this is going to make the editor of this, but something we researched just after the official end of him being on. But Andrea Colpani with another goal for Monza. We haven't really talked about him much this season, but having a brilliant season, the 24-year-old. He scored 6 goals now from midfield, as well as 1 assist, which I saw a statistic saying that across Europe, only Jude Bellingham among midfielders has more combined goals and assists. It's one of those statistics where I sort of, first of all, want to double check it because that's something I've just seen quoted somewhere else. And also, I get really sort of, my eyebrow raises a bit about where we sort of define these lines between midfielders and attackers, because both of them are players who break the lines. But anyway, it's certainly been a really impressive start for Colpani, who absolutely is getting a lot of attention. And I think someone even made a Bellingham question to him at the end of the game and was saying how flattered he was by that. I don't think we need to put him quite in that bracket just yet, but certainly one who we'll all be keeping our eye on as things go forward for another potentially emerging Italian talent. We had another 1-1 draw, Udinese against Atalanta. Udinese getting some slightly better results now. Missed opportunity perhaps for Atalanta to make up some ground with Napoli and Milan dropping points. Genoa won 1-0 home to Verona. Sassuolo drew 2-2 with Salernitana, and Fiorentina beat Bologna 2-1. The other big news this week, of course, is the international games coming up, which I'm absolutely not nervous about, not stressed out about, not anxious about the idea that Italy could miss a third major international tournament out of the last 4. Definitely not worried about that. Of course, bears reminding everyone, if Italy were to miss out on the top 2 in the group, they would still have a way into the tournament through the playoffs because of their Nations League performance, but absolutely not the way that Italy would want things to go. Recent playoff experience for one reason, secondly, just because Italy should not be needing that in this group. With all acknowledgement and respect, as patronising as that now sounds, to North Macedonia and Ukraine, some very good footballers in both those teams. Italy absolutely should expect to finish in the top 2 in this group. They have got those 2 games left to come. North Macedonia at home in Rome on Friday. Ukraine, the away game, of course, can't be played in Ukraine, but being played in Leverkusen on Monday. They really need to get in practice. They need to beat North Macedonia and then not lose to Ukraine should be enough to put them through to the tournament. So it's North Macedonia at home in Rome on Friday, and then the game against Ukraine is officially away from home, but will be played, of course, in Leverkusen on Monday. In practice, what Italy need to do here is to take 4 points from these 2 games. They can either draw at home to Macedonia and then beat Ukraine in the final game, or they can beat North Macedonia and draw with Ukraine, either of those scenarios will see them finish in the top 2. I think, of course, you would like them just to take the approach of going to try to win both those games, but whatever gets us across the line at this point, and recent history with North Macedonia adding a layer of anxiety, I would suppose, to many Italians' experience of these games. There's been a series of injury and illness dropouts for Italy, and no Alex Merritt, no Calabria, no Toloi, no Locatelli. So Spalletti has brought Lazzari and Biraghi into the squad. It's definitely not the full strength team that would have been hoped for, but I expect we'll see something as close as he can manage to what we saw for the qualifiers last month. I don't expect we'll see any brave choices like Vicario in goal, even though some people would like to see that in the longer run going forward. That's this week. We'll be back after that with the international game. We'll come back to the Derby d'Italia, to Milan, Fiorentina, Atalanta, Napoli, some mouth-watering games to come back to, and of course a new Napoli manager expected. Again, not official at time of recording, but that is all for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and get well soon, Mina. Hopefully we'll be back next week with the two of us to talk about the international games. But until then, that's all from me.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.